there. So for my second choice in my spooky reads for spooky season, I've chosen something from Stephen King because you read horror, you have to talk about Stephen King. So I'm probably not the Stephen King fan now that I was when I was younger, but when I was a teenager and into my early 20s, I read everything that man published. And some of the stuff that stuck with me the most has been from his short works. So this is a collection called Nightmares and Dreamscapes. I should have looked up the publication date. I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to say the 1980s. And there's a story in here called Dolan's Cadillac. So the first time I read Dolan's Cadillac, I thought it was a scary story. But I didn't get it because I was a kid and I wasn't all that well versed in classics and that kinds of thing. So I didn't realize that it's a riff on Edgar Allan Poe's Cask of Amontillado. So when I came back around to that story later and found that out, I was like, holy crap, this is magnificent. So the Cask of Amontillado, if you don't know that story, that's Edgar Allan Poe, and it's a revenge story. And one of the it's narrated by the guy taking revenge, and he takes really horrific revenge on this man named Fortunato, but we never find out exactly what Fortunato did, or why it was so bad that we had to have this kind of revenge. And it's told in first person from a very reasonable sounding guy. Like, here's a couple of paragraphs from Poe. The thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. Gosh, Poe is so good. So Stephen King's version of it changes the setting and the timing and everything, and it's brought into a much more contemporary setting. And the narrator is a teacher. So, I'm a teacher. And I'll read you a couple of paragraphs from here at the beginning so you can see how these connect. I watched and waited for 7 years. I saw him come and go, Dolan. I watched him stroll into fancy restaurants dressed in a tuxedo, always with a different woman on his arm, always with his pair of bodyguards bookending him. I watched his hair go from iron gray to a fashionable silver, while my own simply receded till I was bald. I watched him leave Las Vegas on his regular pilgrimages to the West Coast. I watched him return. On 2 or 3 occasions I watched from a side row as his sedan DeVille, the same color as his hair, swept by on Route 71 toward Los Angeles. And on a few occasions I watched him leave his place in Hollywood Hills in the same gray Cadillac to return to Las Vegas. Not often, though. I am a school teacher. School teachers and high-priced hoodlums do not have the same freedom of movement. It's just an economic fact of life. He did not know I was watching him. I never came close enough for him to know that. I was careful. He killed my wife, or had her killed. It came to the same either way. Do you want details? You won't get them from me. If you want them, look them up in the back issues of the papers. Her name was Elizabeth. She taught in the same school where I taught and where I teach still. She taught first graders. They loved her. And I think that some of them may not have forgotten their love still, although they would be teenagers now. I loved her, and I love her still, certainly. She was not beautiful, but she was pretty. She was quiet, and she could laugh. I dream of her hazel eyes. There's never been another woman for me, nor ever will be. He slipped, Dolan. That's all you have to know. Now, of course, we go on and we get the whole vengeance story, but I think it's interesting how this is the same and different than the Poe, right? You've got a guy who is very patient about his revenge. And here we're told exactly how long he waited, 7 years. I don't think the Cask of Amontillado says how long, but you get the feeling he's been slowly, methodically plotting this revenge for a long time. Now in the Cask of Amontillado, we never find out what Fortunato did. Right, the story just doesn't tell you, because it doesn't matter, right? The point of the story is not did he deserve it, it's what happened. So Stephen King changed that a little bit. We at least know how he feels about it. He feels that Dolan was somehow responsible for the death of his wife. And the story doesn't leave me as the impartial reader sure how culpable Dolan is or isn't, but that feel, that whole like quiet vengeance, smile in the face of the person, revenge is a dish best served cold, is one of the things that made the original story work and that makes this riff on it work really well. And Stephen King is so good in short form. Sometimes I feel like his longer work bogs down. He has too many side roads and he loses track of the story. But when he's writing short and tight, he is one of the best horror writers out there. So if you are a Stephen King fan, you might want to try out this book, Tracing the Trails, right? So this is a friend of mine, Chad A. Clark, and he did blog posts for a while all about Stephen King's novels. Like he read them all and then wrote commentary on them. And when he put all those posts together into a collection, he invited me to submit an article, and I submitted one about, you guessed it, Dolan's Cadillac. So, great story to check out from Stephen King, and if you only know him from his tomes like The Stand or from his things that have been made into movies, well worth checking out his short work. Happy Halloween.